Hey, my name is Jay Beershank. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are here for another edition of book reviews. Today we have a shirt's new, it's a little bit tight, might be too tight. Anyway, today we're here for another edition of book reviews. This book specializes in how you choose to maintain long-term connection with your partner. And is that connection growing stronger, or is it continuously going through phases of turmoil and serenity or calmness, if you will? And it's very interesting to think about that because society and your specific culture can shape you in certain ways to believe how you should interact with a partner and what they want from you in relationships and what the things you do mean. And this book is a beautiful thought tool to kind of deconstruct some of those ideas and start to think about, okay, wait, maybe, I'm doing this habitually, but maybe it's not actually what I think it is. Maybe it's not having the desired effect, or maybe with the outcome that is my highest ideal, I'm not taking the proper actions to get there, even though that I thought that I was, because of my culture kind of programming me in a certain way, or media, or whatever not program, but just, these influences from the outside. So, yeah, this book is a beautiful thought tool to deconstruct those, and I really enjoyed it. This book is Cupid's Poisoned Arrow by Marina Robinson. So this book specifies between two types of interactions basically with your partner in terms of making love and flirting and being a couple. You can be continuously reinforcing bonding behaviors, and these bonding behaviors are going to release the neurochemical of oxytocin. Oxytocin is described as the chemical that bonds mothers to their children, that bonds children to their parents, and that bonds you to people that you feel like you love. And then there's another type of interactions you can have with your partner, which are more based around reproduction. And when I say reproduction, we're going to be basically talking specifically about orgasm. So what this would mean would be having sex continuously to orgasm, I would say unconsciously. You're just having sex because you believe that it's the right thing to do, and it makes you feel closer to your partner, and it's kind of what society has told you, like good sex, lots of orgasms, you will have a close relationship with your partner if those things are happening, blah 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 blah. And it's really interesting to think about that, just if you stop for a second and think, like, yeah, before I started reading this book, like, I understood that, like, being close to a woman and like really holding the space and being held in her space and that love is really something special. And I really realized after reading this book that I think the reason that I was always inclined to rush towards sex with women was because I craved the bonding behaviors that I feel like would come after, which are kind of like this, very dopamine flushed sensual time together, holding after you have sex and everything. And I would always really desire that, but I never knew how to get it besides having sex. So it's really interesting to think about that. And anyway, so you have these two behaviors. You have bonding behaviors and you have reproduction behaviors. And basically what she's saying in this book is when you engage in reproduction behaviors consistently, you're actually sending you're like misfiring your neurochemicals, because what she talks about in this book is an orgasm will produce a very high surge of dopamine, and with this very high surge of dopamine will come the following downfall. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word, but when something goes up, it has to come down. So if you have a really high surge of dopamine after orgasm, it'll have to come down. And another way that she described this is actually it's your genes' technique to try to proliferate, because your genes' main focus and only mission is to proliferate and to continue their offspring and to continue the best chance of survival. And the best chance of survival will be to have children with as many partners as you can, because the more diverse your gene pool, the more likely it will be able to live through a catastrophe or any sort of thing like that. So it's really interesting when you start to think about your genes using you as a way to proliferate themselves by undermining your relationships after you have an orgasm. I think that's extremely interesting. All the other like neurochemical stuff aside, like the dopamine and the oxytocin and the other ones that they talk about. There's a few other major ones I'd never heard of, actually. It was quite interesting to read about that. But yeah, it's very interesting when you start to think about, you know, all these things that are going on inside of our bodies and our minds that we're just completely unconscious of because they're happening, you know, at a level that isn't really conducive to us to be thinking about in our daily lives because we're, you know, just living. And so it's really interesting that all these things are going on behind the scenes, like these genes having this kind of undermining plan to proliferate by making you habituate to your partner. And the habituation process is the release of certain neurochemicals after orgasm that will make your partner seem less attractive and make you feel more angsty and these types of things. Now the counter side of this reproduction-based behavior is bonding-based behavior. And bonding-based behavior can just be like really simply put down to just like cuddling, making eye contact, just like being truly present with someone. You know, like think about how you would try to bond with, if you're a parent, with your kids, or how you would try to bond with, you know, your sister if you wanted to be close to them, or something like this, you know. It's like, it's so fundamental, but it can be easily overlooked. You know, I think so many people place relationship problems on the other person, or, you know, and then try to fix it with sex and all these things. And this book is really saying, like, if you try to fix your relationship with orgasms, you're like really going down like the completely wrong path. And I'm not saying that most people would try to do that, but it's just an interesting thought tool that instead of like trying to up the passion and up the, you know, desire between the two people, just focus on trying to bond with your partner through cuddling and deep conversation, prolonged eye contact, and these sorts of things. Anyway, so that's what the book's about, and this book is actually really awesome. It took me a while to read because it is a bit redundant. It kind of like makes orgasm seem like terrible and you shouldn't orgasm. You know, it's not what she says, but that's kind of how the book makes it seem. And I feel like the information and the studies that she references, they're always kind of circling back to this same point about the oxytocin dopamine, you know, thing. And so it got a bit redundant and hard to read. But I think that it will bring immense value to anybody who reads it, because I know, like, I got into a relationship a few months ago, and I've been using principles from this book, all the time to try the best that I can to be the most loving partner. And before, I maybe would have thought that that meant, you know, like very passionate sex. And after reading this book, I realized like what I was craving, and now I understand how to give that to my partner. And so that's really a powerful thing, actually. And also the neurochemical significance behind it all is really interesting. And understanding that your genes have this kind of hidden agenda takes a lot of the pressure off of like past relationships that you may have felt like you ran away from or didn't understand why things weren't working or why you were unhappy. And also in the end of this book, I haven't read the end of it because the last like 20 pages are like these 3-week exercises that you can do with your partner to kind of ease into bonding-based lovemaking, which I think is extremely interesting, because kind of what she's advocating towards is like eventually if you try this, you'll get to a point where you don't want to ejaculate with your partner anymore, and you guys will get to a different kind of lovemaking where you're, you know, specifically doing only bonding-based behaviors, and you save ejaculation purely for reproduction. So in the end of this book, they have this 3-week course that takes you through these kind of exercises you can do to, you know, become familiar with it. And I'm really interested to try that with my girlfriend. I want her to read the book first before I bring that up to her, just because, you know, you got to have buy-in and everything, because it is kind of a taboo thing to tell someone, you know, like that we shouldn't be orgasming anymore. This is actually pushing us so farther apart and all that kind of stuff. And also the significance of oxytocin is really powerful. You know, this book talks about it, and I did some independent research. Oxytocin can have really positive effects on us. And oxytocin is what is produced primarily when we're doing these bonding-based behaviors. So it benefits your relationships, but it also benefits you personally. And it's just really interesting. I highly recommend checking this book out. Cupid's Poisoned Arrow, Marina Robinson. For anybody interested in relationships, for anybody interested in being a lover, for anybody interested in getting over blockages within themselves, addiction, these types of things, you know, because a lot of it, they talk about like this dopamine surge, And you know, we get dopamine surges from so many different things, and the reward circuitry in our brain, you know, it affects kind of our motivation levels and all these different things. And if we're getting reward circuitry from oxytocin instead of dopamine, we can become much more productive, happy individuals. I think, after reading this book and doing a little bit of independent research about it, I think that it's definitely something to consider. And you know, a lot of the practices and stuff, like a lot of the ways I talk about releasing oxytocin, you know, you would do them normally, but it's much more powerful when you have intention behind it and you understand why you're doing the things that you do. Like, oh, instead of like, oh, this just feels good, I do it, but it's like, oh, this feels good because of this, and the more that I do it, the more likely that, you know, blah blah blah. And so it's just an interesting thought tool, definitely. Anyways, thank you guys very much for watching. I'm sorry this video took so much longer. It's been like 3 months since my last video. I'm going to be reading much more. I have a little bit more time now, so thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Take it easy. Peace.